My first and possibly last trip. Very intense. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's no one, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report is coming from Finn off Salvia.net. The drugs used, Salvia and cannabis. The route of administration, smoked. Gender, male. Prior experience includes cannabis. And the setting, at a friend's house. So here we are back with another Salvia report, a substance that has been requested quite a bit. This is a first-time experience where Finn captures the essence well of what may spring up on Salvia when you're new to it. He does it with a friend with music playing, and his environment quickly begins to warp, contort, and go all kinds of ways, where Finn himself experiences feeling the same things. To say the least, he goes through ego loss and really didn't know what he was getting himself into, hence the title of this. It does get to a point where he is somewhat fighting the trip, but Salvia's short duration led the trip to fade before things got too drastic. The Salvia experience described by many are often that of, it can be the weirdest experience, it can be one of the most discomforting, it can be one of the strongest, most intense, it can be one of the most life-changing experiences someone can go through. Salvia isn't something to take lightly, and this experience shows well what may happen if you do. I'm sure you'll enjoy this, so without further ado, let's dive right into this. It was the winter a few years ago, and I had been an avid supporter of marijuana and a regular user. I was at a friend's house, and he mentioned to me that he had some salvia and asked if I wanted to try. He explained what it was and a previous trip he had. Being naive and uneducated about the psychedelic experience, I immediately said yes. His house had a living room with a high ceiling and a few large windows. We dimmed the lights, and I put in a burnt Ravi Shankar CD I had made for a night of smoking. My friend packed the bowl pretty well. I wasn't sure as to what the strength was or anything like that. I probably should have asked. I took a mighty hit and held it for about 20 to 30 seconds. I began laughing uncontrollably, and I proceeded to put the bowl and lighter down. I'm not sure, but I vaguely remember picking up my acoustic and strumming it once or twice, then putting it down. A few more seconds pass, and I looked to my left, the side of the couch my friend was on. He was wearing a hoodie and a hat, so the only part of his skin that was revealed were his face and his hands. All of a sudden, everything except his skin began to move in a wavy, almost liquid motion to the bottom left of my vision. I looked forward, and the trip was becoming almost more real than reality itself. I tried getting up and moving around so that I could stop melting into the couch, but every effort I made to separate was futile. I had this sensation of feeling the air around me as though it were a magma of sorts. I felt this motion or force from the middle of my spine go over my head and into my stomach. The top half of my body was twisting to the right, and my lower half was twisting to the left. All of this compelled me to get up. His living room had black carpet, which when walked on felt like black sand. Mind you, I was listening to Ravi, which made me feel like I was in Egypt. This doesn't make much sense since Ravi's Indian, but that's how I felt. As I walked slowly, lifting my feet up for fear of sinking, I walked over to one of the windows, which was right next to the stereo, and looked into what I could only explain as a reflection of myself in a tube-like fashion. This was very surreal and freaked me out. I began to make my way back to the couch, at which point I stopped and looked at my hands, which is something I feel people tend to do when they're tripping. I was seeing the world as though I were wearing contacts with coarse stone zigzags and googly eyes. They were in my focus and blurred everything and took on the color of whatever was behind them. The sitar, the instrument Ravi plays, was droning on and had a constant buzzing sound to it. This I perceived as the stone zigzags humming to me. When listening to the music, I thought of every different sound as a line for some reason unknown to me. I sat back down on the couch quickly, because I was majorly freaked out. I turned to my friend, who was still on the couch, and asked him to turn off the stereo, even though I was just next to it. He responded with, "I can't." This was it for me, and I began to question the lines of reality and this other world I had immersed myself into. I put my hands over my eyes and began fighting the trip. I moved my hand away from my face, and things began to settle down again. Eventually, the music stopped, and things were returning to normal, but everything had a whitish glow. I stared at a hanging plant being rocked gently by the heater, but I only saw the hanging parts go from one peak of a swing to the next. This I enjoyed, and to which I said, "This is what Peter Frampton felt like." I don't get it either. After that, the night went on, and my friend and I took some more. Looking back, I acted foolishly by just diving headfirst into something I had no knowledge of whatsoever. This substance can be used for great spiritual or philosophical progression and should be used as such. If I had known what I was getting into, I might not have taken it, or instead used it for a meditative and progressive experience. Okay, so a pretty brief but descriptive first-time experience with salvia, one that frankly reminds me of my first time trying it. But we're going to break down salvia a little bit here so we can get a better idea of what was going on during Finn's trip. But as I stated earlier, for some, salvia is the epitome of weird. It sounds like it is a psychedelic, and granted, experiences tend to act in such a way, but salvia itself acts on a completely different set of receptors than traditional psychedelics, it mainly acting upon kappa opioid and dopamine receptors, which no other substance really acts in this way. So right away, there's a big physical gap with salvia when it comes to defining it as a substance. Yes, it can be psychedelic in a sense, but the other effects that can pop up make some label it being dissociative and even delirious. There can be strong feelings of disconnect with salvia, not only with the environment, but of the self. Feelings of depersonalization are common, and it isn't uncommon for a complete ego death to occur as well. And if such an instance occurs, it's often regarded as unpleasant. Today's report had much more of a spiritual theme behind it, but it gave us a taste for how intense things can get. But there are reports of people transforming into completely different objects and entire settings. The common example I like to bring up is imagine turning into a fridge or a conveyor belt, and that being your entire existence. You have no memory of yourself because you're an ego death, so you come to think that this is your whole reality. And if that isn't enough, salvia itself can just have a dark tone. It can give a user the feeling that things are just wrong, or just that something isn't right about the whole thing, further pushing a delirious theme. Both objectively and subjectively, salvia is in its own lane at the end of the day. It is thought to be one of the safest substances to consume as well, and it is legal in various areas, being sold in head shops and whatnot. But like in this report here, using salvia isn't necessarily a pleasant ride. It can be just as powerful, if not more powerful, than DMT. The main difference with salvia, though, is that it does seem to be more consistent, providing difficult experiences like this one presented today. A common issue with salvia is the way it can be sold, as it is often offered as an extract. We've covered it in a report before, but one called super sticky salvia is very common and is known to go up to strengths of 100 times the strength of a normal salvia leaf. Spiritually, it has been used by the Mazatec shamans in Mexico, where it would either be made into a tea or chewed, and often with the set and setting varying tremendously. Following such practices may bring out the spiritual side of salvia more so, and the dosage probably also helps better avoid strong levels of discomfort. But with a lot of salvia reports today, often the narrative is that a user stumbles upon it in a head shop, most commonly as an extract, and they get it looking for a potentially different high, or maybe just to have a strong-ass trip, and that attitude can really throw someone off when they realize just how strong salvia can be. And that could be said of any psychedelic really, but salvia itself can really throw off even experienced psychedelic users. But let's bring up a couple other reports to see how it compares to this one. The last salvia report we did was Vision of the Nagual by Toltec Warrior, where he too also acquired an extract for his first time trying it. The trip isn't visually dominant like this one was, but Toltec Warrior describes experiencing a strong loss of ego. He seemed to retain everything externally, as he remembered his friend who was with him during the experience. but lost any thought as to who he was. He even says that his internal dialogue seemed to be non-existent. He describes this as returning to a more original state of being. Those feelings alone were enough to shake him up, so I'm sure you can just imagine how Finn did with all those visuals on top. It's no surprise that someone may be overwhelmed by this. The other report I want to bring up is a bit of a different one that generally turned out positive for the user. This report being Positively Positive by Ricker. Instead of having his ego completely ripped away from him, Ricker ends up describing going back to his childhood in Mexico, where he was just running and playing around freely. He came out feeling amazed and wonderful. The fact that he decided to just smoke a base leaf probably better suited him for this experience. He does mention smoking it 2 to 3 times a week though, and did show interest in moving up to a 5x extract. But this report shows just how much the dosing can play a role when it comes to salvia. But we're going to end it there for today. If you guys did enjoy this report, you want to hear more on salvia or any other substance at all, let me know in the comments below and we can do that. If you aren't already following, go on the Patreon. There's new content, a new trip report every week. If you have your own report you want to see, send it in to NoOneSubmitReport@gmail.com. If you did enjoy today's video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, follow me on the socials, and if you can, share the video. It's been someone that's someone, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.